Hello, this is a demonstration on how to copy a man's shirt. The first thing that you should do is to press your garment so that you're working with nice smooth cloth. I've chosen a striped shirt because stripes can be really useful, especially when you're beginning to learn techniques of how to copy garments. The shirt is probably one of the most simple. I've looked at my stripes and I've checked to see if it was cut correctly in the first place so that there's no warping in the stripes. When I look down the side seams, I can see that the stripe is still relatively straight on both sides. It only starts to come out towards the armhole for the greater measurement of the chest. You can see that down the centre fronts that the stripe is straight on both sides, and also across the back yoke and collar. This has been a well-made garment and the fabric has remained stable. One of the other things that I've done while I was ironing it, I folded my garment in half and pressed a crease down the centre so that I only need to copy half of the garment. I've also done the same to the sleeve, taking care that I kept the seams nice and straight. And you can see also on the sleeves that the stripe has stayed true to the straight of grain going down the centre of the sleeve. I'll choose the buttonhole side of the shirt because this gives me the true centre front, because this is where the buttonholes are. Sometimes on men's shirts, the underneath side with the buttons on isn't always a full width. Sometimes they've made it slightly narrower. So we always copy from the side with the buttonholes. Because this is a straight line, I will draw a straight line first and then line the garment up to it. So you can see I've drawn a straight line and then I'm bringing my garment to it and lining it up to touch the line. When we pin to the paper using a flower head pin, you can see that it lays flat. If we use a pin with a pearl or a bead on the end, it can cause distortions around the bead head. So it's best to use a flat pin if you can get them, but if you can't, it's only a small distortion and we tend to use what we can get our hands on. Okay, a shirt isn't very thick, so our paper doesn't tend to tear quite so much. So we are able to go in through the garment and into the paper. But if this was a jacket or a coat and that was thicker fabric, our paper would more often than not tear. So the beauty of using the flower head pins and then cardboard on your table is that you only have to push the pin in. You don't have to make it come back out again. So you can do a row of pins, just pushing them in, and they key into the cardboard and stay stable. There, you see? It's not moving. So that's nice and steady. Okay, Now we need to see how much of the garment will lay flat. We can see that we can, in this particular shirt, from say the first 5 centimetres of the armhole downwards, we can lay this flat, yet it's difficult to get the upper part to lay flat and smoothly at the same time. So what we do is that we put a row of anchor pins in, to actually secure the area there. So the area that we are going to copy first will be below the pins. I'm making sure that my armhole is laying nice and flat. And I'm pinning close to the corner, allowing the flower of the pin to rest against the top stitching. Okay, so I've secured the lower part of the shirt. I'm then just going to draw around the curve. I'm going to draw into the buttonholes. This will give me an idea of the centre front. And then I'm going to use a tracing wheel to go up through the side seam and round the armhole. This is an old shirt, so I'm using a tracing wheel. If this had been a delicate vintage piece or a beautiful blouse or shirt that I was wanting to take greater care of, not to spoil, I would use my awl and I would individually go through and make a little indentation through the garment into my paper about every centimetre and about every 5 millimetres around a curve. This is an old shirt, so I'm using the tracing wheel. This area here, I can feel that there's a spare button and a label, so the tracing wheel won't go through. But luckily this is a straight area, and if I have the indentations before and after it, I'll know to just fill that area in. Now you can see here that this is lifting very slightly. Now the curve of the sleeve here has gone off grain, so that is likely to have just stretched really slightly when it was sewn originally, and then through general wear at that area under the arm. I can tell that it is slightly stretched because this is a stripe and the stripe is straight. If it hadn't been stretched, my stripe would be starting to distort. So I'm wheeling around the armhole. I go slightly past the armhole on both sides, the armhole and the side seam, so that I will see a definite cross of where the two meet. Here where the label is, I wasn't able to draw that, so I am working through with the tracing wheel to make sure I've got a definite edge and double checking that I have my line. Okay, so now I can undo this area because that's now been completed. As I lift, I'll lift gently to check and make sure that my tracing has gone through. At this point, if I found that either the indentations hadn't come through when I traced, or that I'd missed an area, because my row of anchor pins and my centre front is still pinned, I would be able to roll the garment back and get back into exactly the same position, and then redo any areas that I'd missed. The anchor area and the centre front are secured so that we know that the garment can't move. We can then lay the upper part of the garment. I'm going to turn the sleeve inside out just so that you can see this area more easily when I'm copying it. But you don't necessarily need to do this when you're just working on your own. I'm just tucking it out of the way. Right, so now you can see that the upper part of the shirt can lay flat. You can see here that the neck is lifting slightly. It's the same situation as we had under the arm. This is a curve and going across the grain, which tends to stretch slightly when it's made. So we've got to take care not to copy the neck with the neck stretched out flat, because as you can see, that will make the stripes distort. So we know that that is actually stretched. We need to allow the stripes to lay straight, and this will let us see that there's just, we keep this flat, we keep the shoulder flat, the centre front flat, and we just allow this little bubble of fabric to be there. And it's there on almost every garment that you will come to copy, because it cannot be helped. As you're stitching a collar around the neck, it will slightly distort the curve at the front. Now, I'm just pinning that collar out of the way. You wouldn't normally bother doing that. You would just hold it if you were doing this for yourself. And then I'm actually going to secure the corners first so that nothing moves. Okay, and then I'm going to use my tracing wheel and make my way around the neck, shoulder, and then the upper arm. Right, I'm leaving my anchor pins and my centre front pins in position so that when I undo these two pins on the shoulder and the one at the upper neck, when I lift that away, I can see if my indentations have come through, and if they haven't, I can get back into exactly the same position again. So I'm lifting. I can see a very slight bend in this shoulder line, and that is just the distortion of the fabric. Over time, that should actually be a straight line. So when we're finishing our pattern off at the end and checking that everything matches together, I will be straightening that line up.